record is revealed. Hi, I'm Lady Lex UK and this is Reconstructing Art's Dream. Now, if you've been following this series, then you know that I have been trying to recreate some of the game mechanics in Art's Dream. I'm not planning on building the entire game. It's not designed to look exactly the same. What I'm trying to do here is just to do some of the game mechanics and create some little tutorials for you. So, you just saw the clip there. That is three different scenarios. So we've got the revealing of the album, there's all of that with the double bass, and then there's some fiddling about with a light and some shadow play. What we're going to do today is the reveal of the record album. So let's get going. We've got our first person character model here directly out of Media Molecule's Start Collection. I haven't fiddled about with him other than to turn the imp activate on. So we're going to need to start with a trigger zone. So I'm going to put one of those down at the entrance of the door. I'm going to make that zone a square like that. So when he walks in, just make sure that's set to possessed controller sensors. That's going to set off that trigger zone, and that can activate whatever we need. Now I'm going to use a counter as a active switch, if you like. This is what I like to use. There are other methods that you can use. People use nodes, they use actual switches, but this is the method I like, and that is to use a counter. So I'm going to call this counter start scene. Okay, now this is a 1-0 counter, so when I wire up the detect zone to the increase count, that's going to fill up this counter. This counter will be full, and I can wire this to whatever I need. Now, the reason that I have this and not just go through the trigger zone is because when you have a trigger zone, it activates when the player is inside the trigger zone, and as soon as they're not in the trigger zone, it will turn itself off, and then everything else would turn off. So this way, as soon as they step into the trigger zone, it immediately fills this counter, and this counter stays full even if they walk out of the trigger zone. So we have a start scene situation here. Now, because I don't want our player to move around while they're viewing our little scenes, I'm going to deactivate his controls. So I'm going to use this to do it. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to scope in, so L1 and X until I get to the puppet logic. Then I'm going to open up that puppet logic, excuse me. Now I've already opened this up earlier, so I've opened up logic processing, and then I opened up controller logic, and then I found my controller sensor. So L1 and square to open up that tweak menu. Let's go back down here. Now you'll notice I can't see my trigger zone or anything anymore, so you need to go into that little eye symbol and turn on X-ray, and now I can see it. So there is my counter. I'll go to the imp page, and at the very bottom it looks like a Ghostbuster symbol. That's the disabled controls. So I'm going to wire counter full into disabled controls, and that way once the player is in this scene, his controls will be disabled, so he can't walk about until I say so. And now we're going to put in a microchip to house all of our working parts for this little scenario here. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to use laser scopes for this. Now the idea is you have these records. Let me just scope out of our puppet, make sure Actually, let's do that again because I think I put that microchip in the puppet. Let's scope out of the puppet, make sure you're out. Then put your microchip down. I've done that a few times and made the mistake. Okay, there we go. That's independent now. Right. The idea here is we have some records on top of this album, and you're going to pull them away, and once you've pulled them all away and revealed the album underneath, that is when it's going to swap to the second game. So our first game will be completed once you've removed the records, and we're going to use laser scopes to do this. But before we do anything else with our laser scope, I'm going to label our album. This is our album that I've designed here. This was actually a book cover that I did for the novel game jam. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go into labels, and I'm going to label this up as an object. So now when I put my laser scopes down, I can ignore all objects. So it's not going to pick up itself. It's only going to pick up the records. So I'm going to stamp that laser scope down, and I'm going to open up its tweak menu, go into labels, and I'm just going to unselect object. So it's not going to look for that. So it's going to ignore this book. It's not going to accidentally detect that because I don't want it to. Now you'll notice that the gizmo is pointing directly on like this, and it's not what we want it to stick straight up in the air. So you hold L2 and then move the right stick, and then you can maneuver the gizmo so it's now pointing upwards. There we go. Not completely upwards. Doesn't going to matter too much for these records, but there you go. There we are. So that's now pointing straight up, and I'm going to also just move it slightly down. So I'm going to hold it with R2, and then I'm just going to put it slightly down inside the book so that if there's anything, the record is on top of the book will definitely get picked up. Because if it was too high, it was like up here, and then the record was underneath it, for example, it wouldn't detect it. So let's just, we'll put it inside the book a bit. There we are, inside the album a bit. Right, now we're going to copy that a few times. I'm going to do three records. I'm going to stamp that and copy. There we go. And because you copied it rather than stamping new ones, all those settings are set already. Right, so there we go. There are our 3 laser scopes. We're now going to put some logic in. So I'm going to use some NOT gates, because what we're interested in here is whether there is not anything touched by this laser. So the laser gizmo, here it is here, if anything breaks that line, anything that interferes between that laser scope, this line, it's going to say, I can see that, I can detect that. We want to know if they can't detect anything. Because if they can't detect anything, then there's nothing on top of it. So we've got lots of NOT gates, and we want to know if all of them are free from records. So we're going to put an AND gate in here, and then we're going to wire our hit something outputs into the NOT inputs. Hit something, and there's our final one. Hit something. There we go. Okay, so that's all wired up. Now let's get our records. We want to make sure that you can grab and move this record, so we're going to go into properties of the sculpture of our record, choose movable and grabbable. And then I'm going to lay my record on top of the album, and as always with 3D, you have to get yourself at the right angle so you can see if it's floating or anything like that. There we go. So there's our record, there's our first record, and you can see that laser scope has now gone black. That's because it's now active. It's saying, yes, I'm hitting something with my laser. But if you look at this NOT gate, which is related to this laser scope, you'll see this is now yellow. So it's no longer active. And because that's no longer active, and all 3 of these must be active for this to be active, this is no longer active. That was an awful lot of active words, but there we go. So that's how this will work. I'm going to place another record. I'm just going to copy, place another one there, copy, place another one there. So now you see all of these are now not active, and neither is the AND gate. And this AND gate is our result. So we want, once you've removed, we want something to happen. Let's play a little piece of music, shall we? So we'll go into sound mode, and I'm just going to grab a music clip from Media Molecule. Music track, music clips. What should we have? Something melodic. I don't know how long this piece is. Let's see. We'll wire that up to there. And now we're just going to put it into play mode and grab these records off and see if this works. Okay, it's working. We want it to play once rather than loop. So let's rewind that. Let's put the records back. Let's get that so that that plays once. And go again. So move that. Remove that. It's quite a long clip, that one. Let's see if we can find a shorter one. Perhaps they're all quite long. I think that's short. Yeah, there we go. There's a nice short one. So we'll wide that into there. Right, okay. Let's put our records back on. So that's going to play. You see now our records are all over in the air. Right, hang on. Okay, so there we go. So that's going to play that little piece of music there. Now, unfortunately, there's no way of knowing when this is finished. There is no. It's a little annoying, to be honest. You get this. There's no. There's an is playing output. There is no is finished output, which is a bit of an annoyance. I'm going to use a timer just to make it easy for myself. So let's. Can we? Is there any way of knowing it? Dun, 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 dun. I think 7 seconds is probably about right. You'd have to play about with this. And there we go. 7 seconds. I've tried not gates and not gate on it is playing and all sorts of things, and it's a little awkward and it doesn't work. So anyway, we've got our timer, and then we're going to use timer finished signal. And I'm going to use this to power on our next microchip, which has got, whoops, let's open it up. It's got a camera in it, and it's going to aim at that double bass. Right, so there is our little program. We need a camera for this one, so let's stick a camera in. So we need to get that like an overhead shot. There we go, like so. Now be very careful about moving this microchip. If you move the microchip now, it's going to affect the camera position. So we're just going to close that down. And now we're going to wire our counterfall from our start to the power of that. Now what is going to happen is that once you get into the trigger zone, the camera in the player is going to be overwritten by the camera in this microchip, and we're going to see this area here. So let's play. Okay, let's walk in. There we go. And I'll move my record. And then we moved over to the base. I nearly got it right for 7 seconds. That wasn't too bad. So there you go. There is how to do the record reveal. Now, the thing about this record reveal and the laser scope, although you might not be doing a reveal, you could be using exactly the same technique to do a detection for like a pressure pad. So for example, if I had this and this, and I wanted to know if this cylinder was on top of that square, then you would use a very similar technique. So this is useful for, although I'm trying to recreate ArtStream, it applies to lots of things. So we got a laser scope here. I'm going to stick it on there. Let's move the laser scope up. Okay, and what it's trying to find is the cylinder. So now you can look for a tag, but it's going to look for a tag. So we can put a tag on our object, so it's looking for a specific object, or like we did before, we could use labels. So I can label up, so this time he's only looking for object, and we label up this as an object. And so when, there we go, when I break the signal there, when that's on top, and you can use that as like a pressure pad for opening doors or various different puzzles. And like you did here where you had AND gates, you could have it so that you have to have, say, your imp has to have moved 3 of these cylinders onto 3 separate pedestals before the door will open and that sort of thing. So that's how you would use a laser scope, and there's lots of applications for this particular method. So have a play about with it. See what you could make. Thank you for watching. Hope that was useful, and I'll catch you in your dreams.